Another really important news story today is that the government, again, I mean, perhaps this is another reason to salute the government. Puberty blockers for under 18s with gender dysphoria will be banned in the United Kingdom, the Department of Health and Social Care has announced. Following official advice from medical experts, existing emergency measures banning puberty blockers will be made indefinite, the government said. The Commission on Human Medicines published expert advice that there is currently an unacceptable safety risk in the continued prescription of puberty blockers. Thank God for that. And joining us from one of the best bodies ever, Sex Matters, the Director of Campaigns, McAnena, Fiona McAnena. Good afternoon. How are you?
Hello there, Jeremy.
This is great news, isn't it?
It's very good news. I think people need to understand that, you know, blocking the puberty of unhappy children was never a good idea. There was never good evidence for it. And sadly, parents and children have been told that this is what they need. And so it's quite courageous for government ministers to stand behind something that was put in place by the previous government. So what we've seen now is the Tories brought this in. Labour have maintained it. Well done to Wes Streeting. He was very clear in the House today. And he actually made special mention of the whistleblowers from the Tavistock Clinic, people who had called out the dangers of this treatment years ago and in some cases, you know, risked their jobs for it. So people who are wondering, well, this is a medical treatment, what's the big deal? Just think about it. This is basically saying to a little boy or a little girl, you can change sex and we'll give you treatment to stop your puberty from happening.
Can I ask you to explain to people from what age this had been happening? Because this, to me, again, is frightening. And I join you in saluting Wes Streeting. A second cabinet minister I'm saluting during the show, Angela Rayner, about prisons only, in brackets, close brackets. But Wes Streeting, absolutely correct. How young were kids getting these puberty blockers from doctors and from clinics?
Well, possibly as young as 8 in some cases. You see, the problem is, Jeremy, that children were being told that perhaps they were in the wrong body. And then in their primary school years, they were socially transitioning. So they were, and this is still happening, they were presenting as if they were the opposite sex. They were living in stealth as the opposite sex. And when puberty comes along, you can't pretend anymore. And so these poor, distressed children were being told that they should go to school pretending to be the other sex, and that if puberty were to start, that would be a disaster. So typically around 10 or 11 is when puberty starts. And so some of these children were given it even before. And the worst thing about it is, we're told that it was time to think, that it was reversible. That is not true. The evidence we do have is that almost without exception, a child who is put on puberty blockers goes on to cross-sex hormones. They do not become the other sex. They become an infertile version of their own sex. It is not healthcare. And
how, just for people like me who are genuinely pleased, massively pleased this is done, how widespread was the prescription of puberty blockers? Because it sounds a dreadful thing to have allowed. How long has it been going on for? And how widespread was it?
Yeah, the record keeping at the Tavistock was very poor. It was one of the things that was criticised by the judges in a High Court case a couple of years ago, the Kirabel case. So we're not quite sure. It seems that there may have been a couple of thousand children in the UK put on these treatments. It accelerated very rapidly in the last 8 or 9 years. So way back in time, there used to be a handful of little boys every year who would get this treatment. And in recent years, there have been hundreds and hundreds, and it's switched to be 2/3 girls. You know, thankfully, those poor children who were misled into thinking this was good treatment, and their parents, thankfully, most of them will now be protected from that. But there are thousands of children getting this treatment in other countries. It's huge in Australia, it's huge in North America. And it's very damaging to children.
I mean, it's massively damaging. And what it does for me as well, this whole, you know, puberty blockers for under 18s with gender dysphoria, finally banned. But gender dysphoria, how is that defined? How does anybody have the right, with such a young child who doesn't know their brain, their sexuality, their body, almost every component of who the hell they are, who feels safe enough to make that decision? Who's qualified enough to make that decision?
Well, what does it even mean to have gender dysphoria?
Yeah.
You know, diagnostics seem to be that if you don't fit sex stereotypes, that maybe you're in the wrong body. And then the awful thing that's happening is children in primary school are being told that this is possible, and they're being given picture books that show them boys and girls deciding they're in the wrong body. Then the parents and the adults around them think that maybe that's the kind thing to do. Everyone plays along. There's been huge pressure on doctors, for example, to be what's called gender affirming, also on therapists. So if you take a confused child to a therapist these days, the therapist is afraid to challenge what that child is saying. So you get this insane situation where a child who, as you say, knows
Is
nothing,
a child.
told.
Is a child.
Yes.
A child's not going to know its mind at 8 years of age. So in essence, what puberty blockers were, unless I'm missing the point, you always help me, is if we convince you or you somehow hear from somebody else that you might at some point want to change your sex, we'll give you them now and you can make a decision down the road.
Yes, but everyone around you is, first of all, they're telling you it's possible to change sex, but it's not. You cannot, as a child, understand what that's going to do to your body, which is, in some cases, quite horrific. And thirdly, what you don't know, and no one tells these poor children, is that the best cure for any kind of gender confusion is puberty. When they go through puberty, they'll realise what they are, and mostly that resolves any discomfort, and that's been blocked. So that's why all these children end up going on to cross-sex hormones. So it doesn't buy them time. It confirms this medical pathway that they're on, which is harmful.
I have to say, McAnena, Fiona, Sex Matters, I blow smoke quite rightly in the direction of your organisation every time. Thank you so much indeed. Fiona McAnena, Director of Campaigns at Sex Matters.